Hello and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelley Vick, your host, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Amy Gallo Ryan is a Brooklyn-based writer and former Condé Nast magazine editor whose work has appeared in Elle, Cosmopolitan, Self, Real Simple, and other publications. Her personal essays have been published on Motherwell, Literary Mama, and Mer Literary. You May Feel a Bit of Pressure, an infertility memoir in essays, is her first book. Amy Gallo Ryan, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your new memoir, You May Feel a Bit of Pressure, Observations from Infertility's Heart-Wrenching Ride. Author Sarah Hoover says Amy Gallo Ryan's You May Feel a Bit of Pressure is a gift to women, those going through fertility struggles, as well as anyone who wants to understand more of the roller coaster that is womanhood. At times heart-wrenching, Ryan's story is also reassuring, and her soothing voice offers a lovely dose of hope in a world where female viewpoints and experience do not often get their deserved airtime. PhD and author Jessica Zucker says, an unsparing, intimate, and deeply honest account of infertility. For all the women out there who feel alone in their struggles, this book is your lifeline. Author Ray Meadows says this raw, honest, beautifully written memoir centers around Ryan's singular pursuit of giving birth to a child and how infertility and the loss of trust in your body upends her very beliefs about herself. You May Feel a Bit of Pressure is as sharply observed as it is moving, buoyed by humor and grace. It will stay with me for a very long time. And one more, author Taylor Hahn says, You May Feel a Bit of Pressure is a raw, rare window into the deep pain and endless hope of infertility. A brave and honest examination of the excruciating journey to motherhood and the love that endures it all. So, with that, what can you tell us about You May Feel a Bit of Pressure?
It is the book that I wish had existed when I was struggling with infertility. I found that so many of the books out there on the subject kind of led with the very specifics of that person's experience. So whether that was a specific diagnosis and it sort of centered around that, or it was, whether someone was older or younger and it's centered around that. And so I kind of felt like if your diagnosis or your age or whatever that thing was didn't entirely align with that person's, you immediately might feel like, well, this book isn't for me. And so infertility was hands down the loneliest time of my life. And so I also was kind of searching for this common ground. And to me, the common ground was the emotions. And that's also what I found the most interesting about the experience. It was this insane emotional, I hate the word journey, but it was a really life-altering emotional experience. And so that's what I was curious about. And also I felt that kind of opened the topic up to every woman who has experienced infertility, because even whatever your diagnosis or your outcome or your stage in the process, I thought that you would know what it was like to hope, to feel shame, to endure the uncertainty. And I just felt like the emotions could sort of bring us all together. And the whole way through, I was always just like looking for my people. And then I think in a way, this is my way to try to find them, you know?
Yeah. Were you writing throughout this journey, this process, or when did you know that you were going to write a book about this?
Um, I wasn't really writing throughout because I kept thinking, then I just kept, I always felt like I was so close.
Hmm.
And, and so my experience never seemed like unusual or remarkable in any way. I was just a person struggling to get pregnant. And, I really had this like fervent belief that I was so close. And I was young when I started trying to get pregnant, and my doctors were optimistic to the point of like dismissive, that it was
Hmm.
going to work. And I believed them. So I don't know, it all just seemed very straightforward. And then it just kept going and going and going and going. Um, and it was only towards the end that I kind of was like, I had a couple kind of crazy, I had an ectopic pregnancy so an emergency surgery, and then a second surgery from complications. And so as it started to get towards that point, I was like, this maybe this is crazy. Like this is really, beyond. And then once I ended treatment, I was in the over the course of that experience, I had quit my job. I was a magazine editor and writer. And so once I was done with treatment, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to my life.
Hmm.
Um, and I took a job. And very quickly, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. My experience had really changed me as a person.
Hmm.
And there was no going back to my old life, my old job. And so, I said, like, okay, I'm actually not going to do this. And I really only wanted to invest my time and focus on things I really cared about, that really mattered to me. And this was what that was. So then I like sat down to start writing, in earnest, but I was too afraid to call it a book. I just was like, I was like, I have this idea, and I hope it could be, I don't know, like I would use this very like vague, coded language, because it felt too like presumptuous or unrealistic to say I'm working on a book.
Hmm.
That was my secret hope.
Um, I love the title.
Thank you.
You may feel a bit of pressure. I love all the weight of the double meaning there. How did you come up with the title?
So it initially had a different title, a more sort of somber title. And I did a sizable-ish revise, and part of that was adding in some more moments of humor or just lighter moments.
Mm-hmm.
And once it was, that made it feel different, and once it was this new version, I felt like the title also needed to change to reflect that. And so I was texting with a writer friend, a very brilliant writer friend, and I had like an idea. We were going back and forth about ideas for the title. And she was like, I always love books that have titles that are phrases. And, I was told there'd be cake, and this will only hurt a bit. And I was like, yeah, those are always so good. And she was like, is there anything like that? Um, maybe something a doctor says, or that's in the medical chart, or like some sort of like phraseology that would lend itself to this. And it just was like, she just asked the right question. And
Hmm.
it immediately, I just typed, and it's funny because I have it all over text, it's kind of cool to see a brainstorm that way.
Yeah.
But I just wrote, you may feel a bit of pressure, and like 100 exclamation points. And it just felt like a moment. And it was a line already in the book, but I had never imagined it as the title. And then she asked that question, and it made so much sense. But even once it was the title, I felt like it was so great and accomplished so much, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
double meaning. Um, but I was like, we all, I think women, we all know that phrase, but we know it behind closed doors in this very
Mm-hmm.
intimate environment. And so um, I thought it would land, but I was like, I hoped it would land, but I wasn't sure. And then once I shared the title, people's response has been so, I don't know, it's been so such a great feeling because it does like resonate so intimately and personally with women, like women in their 70s, women I'm in my 40s, like it just like it feels like this, like I see you kind of
Mm-hmm.
this little wink of like we all know that. And
Mm-hmm.
um it's a good feeling, it's like we're all part of something together.
Yes, yes, it definitely works like that. And I love hearing that story of how it came about, just the moment of brilliance between two women.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly.
it's interesting that you mentioned the moments of levity and
Mhm.
changing the title because I wanted to ask you about that. Of course, there is a lot of heartbreak and strong emotion in the book, but there are these moments of humor and levity. And I wondered if you had done that intentionally in knowingly sort of breaking up the light and the dark, or if that was just the voice that had come out initially. So you said there was a lot of revision there. So
Yes.
how did that work?
Yes. So that was a piece of feedback that I had gotten, that it could benefit because it was not my natural, the humor was not inherently in there. Um,
It sounds very natural.
oh,
It's
good. I'm so
getting,
glad. First
yeah,
of all,
yeah.
I'm so glad that like you took that from it, that you
Mhm.
got, that it resonated, and that it did feel natural because it was definitely a layer that was added, and I think the
Mhm.
book is better for it. I think it was
Mhm.
a great piece of feedback, but it was very much intentional, to add it. And in my very long submission process, I heard so many different things about like, if you're going through it, maybe you don't want to actually read about it. And it's so hard and difficult, and that you kind of want to escape it, or,
Mhm.
and um, for me, as I was going through it, I felt the opposite. I immersed myself in this, and I was desperate for other voices that I could connect with.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, I do think like I'm happy that somebody helped me understand that it could benefit from some humor, and I do think that ultimately then helped me get to the point of the title, which does feel like the title that belongs to the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, along the way, it's hard to know what feedback to listen to and what to sort of say, I hear that and I get that point, but it doesn't feel right to me. And
Mhm.
so I think that's like trusting your writer's intuition, I guess.
Mhm.
But not also thinking you know better, because there's a lot of people who are experts on all these things.
How did you wade through that, I guess, and make that decision? I'm sure, between what feedback you would take on and what feedback it was like, well, yeah, I see what you're trying to make here, but it's not what I'm trying to make. So we can part ways.
Well, and also you get so close to the material,
Yeah.
and this is such an intimate, vulnerable story
Hmm.
that um it was hard not to, you know, feel a certain way about, criticism or, you know, constructive feedback and ways to make it better. It always like stung a little, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, fine. That's like, yeah. Like, yes, you're right. You're totally right. One thing I like initially, ultimately it is now like a memoir and essays, but when I was first on submission with it, it was just a collection of essays and without like a full narrative arc. And I had this idea that like the essays could be read in any order. You wouldn't have to read it cover to cover, and you could jump in and out, and whatever you were experiencing in your process of infertility, you could find the emotion that spoke to you, and that it was this really like user friendly. But then people sort of like let me know that people don't read books that way, and even if you could, like, would you really do that? And so I finally was like, okay, fine, that's fine. You don't have to read it like that. And then I do, as it became a more cohesive memoir with a full narrative arc. But I still hope that it's the sort of thing that you read it front to back as you read most books, but that it lends itself to jumping back in at various points when when there's something that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it does work like that. I wanted to ask you about how that structure came about, because I've seen it called a memoir in essays, and it does feel like each chapter can stand alone by itself and is named after an emotion, right? But there are also little callbacks to the chapters before, so that when you read it straight through from back to back, you're very oriented in space and time. And it does have this kind of propulsive feel. So it is an interesting structure that does both.
Yes, that's good. I'm so glad to hear that. It made sense to me. But I'm always like, I hope that lands the way the way like the way I think it will. But also, I wanted to say also, I had also gotten, that's as an example of feedback that I did incorporate and that did feel right. But then I had also gotten feedback about incorporating journalistic elements throughout, which I think is like I think publishing is doing a lot of that with memoirs right now. It's like, it's half memoir, but there's reportage throughout. And that might make it a more saleable book. And that just never felt right to me. And it wasn't the book that I wanted to write. And it also wasn't the book I had wanted to read when I was struggling with infertility. So that was one thing that I was just like, almost never really considered. Like, just, I was like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've said you felt compelled to write an infertility story that was not defined by outcome, but by the raw emotion and hardship and absurdity of the plight itself. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
One of the most maddening, challenging aspects of the experience to me was the uncertainty. And I found myself upending my entire life. My world just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as I became more consumed by this struggle. And and there was just no guarantee of how it was going to work out. And even in other books that I saw, I was like, well, I don't know what story I'm in. I don't, you don't, none of us know how it's going to work out. And I felt like it was important to capture that. And that's a very difficult reality to sit inside. You're doing everything possible. You're without any guarantees, and really like kind of logic and rational thought, like nothing really applies. Like you're just sort of like gonna try it all, and who knows. And that was so hard. And I think any woman who is struggling to have a baby also doesn't know. They don't know, where this thing spits you out at the end. And so I felt like I liked the idea of kind of honoring that, honoring that like messy, terrible aspect of it.
Do you remember the moment when you sort of first had an inkling that maybe this was an issue?
I remember early on, I can't remember at what point exactly, but before it like was a problem, or that I knew it was a problem, I remember Googling fertility clinics in New York City. And whether that was some weird sixth sense or just my inherent paranoia, I don't know, but some part of me, I'm like, did I know? Like, did I know? But I remember that moment. And I like, it's a great question, because I actually like, I don't know if I've ever like told anybody that, but and it was like a due diligence, I was like, oh, like just but like, I was nowhere near needing to see a fertility specialist, but I was just checking. Yeah, it's like just making sure if that's out there. But it did feel like, as I started trying and I was taking ovulation tests, and according to my ovulation test, like it was just like, you have nothing. There's nothing happening, nothing. And again, I was like reading a book. I was trying to do all the right things, and take charge of my health, and like all the things we're supposed to do. And as I just kept getting this sort of like flatline response from my body, I was like, okay, like, but still, I just never appreciated the extent of it. At every turn, I was like, this is it. Like, especially once we got to IVF, which had been after many rounds of other drugs and procedures and whatever. I was like, I mean, I'm 32 years old and I'm doing IVF. Like, this is surely I would be pregnant at the end of this. And also because my infertility was unexplained. So nobody could give me an explanation for why any of this was happening. And that made me feel like nothing's really wrong. It's just like, and yeah.
You dedicated the book to your husband, Tim. Can you talk about that?
He has just I started writing this 10 years ago. It's been an entire decade. And then, not to mention the years of living the experience. It was a 3-year long infertility experience. And he has been beyond supportive. And also his willingness to share this very personal, he is, it's a very personal story, and he has never once expressed one like shred of A, doubt, B, concern, C, reluctance. Like it was just a like, go. And even like after I finished each essay, he would be the person I gave it to read. And he, he's not a writer, like just in a completely different like corporate world, but he would like take note, he took it very seriously, and he would like take notes and talk to me about it. And but it was all like, who knows if this will ever actually like be a book. And then once I like had it all printed and gave it to him to read in its entirety, front to back. So I like just being like, just so you know, like people are going to read this. And again, he was just like, yes, like just, and we just, his support of the book, but also we lived this infertility experience together, and it was deeply painful for us together and also separate. He had his own, we were like, it's this alone together type of thing. And it was the very earliest years of our marriage, and it was a lot of strain. And we just went through it, and so the book is like a testament to those years. And it could only be dedicated to him.
Yeah. The epigraph at the beginning of the book is a beautiful quote from Ishiguro. But in the end, stories are about one person saying to another, "This is the way it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it feel this way to you?" Can you talk about choosing that particular epigraph?
It's just like, I love the way it distills it down to just one person and one person looking each other in the eyes and having a conversation. And that is like my greatest hope of what this book will feel like to readers. I think it's that intimacy, really spoke to me. And that's how I feel about books in general and stories. Yeah. And I, as a person who did feel so alone through this experience, it's like my greatest hope that someone out there who is also feeling alone will read this and see glimmers of themselves or their own experience, their emotions reflected back to them, and that in that there will be some community, or the loneliness will feel maybe less so if they've had that same thought or that same moment.
What do you hope that readers take away from this?
Connection. I was always so struck by how crowded the clinic waiting room was. But each of us were there in our own little siloed bubble. and we didn't look at each other. We didn't talk to each other. And I felt like it's such a shame because we're all experiencing this really traumatic situation by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody understands, it's all of these people right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think connecting in some of those kind of those unsayable things, or those things that like you felt or experienced but have no idea if anybody else has felt or experienced them, and that moment of recognition, like, okay, this is what it means to be a human being, and this is not something I alone know the truth of.
Have you always been a writer?
I've always been a writer. I have always been a reader. A unbelievably, like, as a kid, I have loved reading forever, and I do feel like reading in abundance is like the best foundation to become a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like an obsessive reader as a kid. And in the book, I talk a little bit about my like first job was volunteering at the library in my town. So yes, I've always been a passionate reader and a passionate writer. I was an English major in college. And writing is just how I express myself, how I feel best able to express myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not a confident speaker, but I feel like my ability to convey exactly what I want to say through writing. That's how I can like determine what I think and feel and express what I think and feel. So to write about this experience too, it allowed me to give shape to this really messy, amorphous, kind of unknowable thing that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then through writing, I felt like I was able to untangle it and give it meaning and make sense of it, which is an incredible, like, I that's amazing. It's amazing. It's like a very powerful tool.
Yeah. What was the road to publication like?
Oh, long, terrible. Oh my gosh. Brutal. This industry is tough, which I didn't know the half of, probably for the better, because it's really tough. I made a million mistakes. I went out querying too early. I wound up siding with an agent. We went on submission, like right before the pandemic, essentially, and so there was sort of like submission before the pandemic and then submission during the pandemic, and those were very different things.
Mm.
And we almost sold it. We thought we sold it. We like celebrated like we sold it, and then it fell apart. And I just really felt so strongly about this project and that it should be a book. And I had gotten enough really strong feedback, and I had gotten enough people saying like, yes, keep going, you're like, this is going to happen. And ultimately, my agent and I parted ways. And then I kind of did this big revise and went out on my own to university presses and indie presses. But like I have kept my like lists of all the crossed out. And I also have a separate document of like all of the really nice, encouraging rejections, which really I have referred back to more times than I can tell you. And like what a long way those, and still they were rejections, but those like almost, we brought it to acquisitions, and I needed that, like these little morsels of
Yeah.
to keep going.
Yeah.
Because it is a long haul, or for me it was at least.
Well, how did it finally happen?
Um, I a press I had submitted to like the previous summer, but hadn't heard back from, and that I had just was like, that's a no. I crossed them out on my list. I heard from almost a full year later, kind of out of the blue. And they were just like, is this project still available? And they, apologized for the delay, and we want to publish it. And by then I had started an application to an MFA program. And I was like, I knew that there was enough here that I could keep going and keep tweaking, and I could get there. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this low residency MFA, and I'm gonna get this over the, I was like, we're at the finish line. I'm gonna get it over the line. And my application to this MFA program was in progress when I got the email saying that they were interested. So it was really like at the end. Or the end of at least one portion of it. Yeah, I'm sure all the people you speak to, you hear every version of this story, but
it's always got a happy ending.
That's right. If we get to the point where we're talking to you, it means something good happened.
Did you do the MFA?
No, so I never did the MFA. I did not do the MFA. No. So maybe that's still out there.
Well, what do you know now that you wish you'd known before publishing first book?
I mean, I do think it would have I can't tell if it would have been good to know or totally demoralizing to know, but like settle in, hunker down, like this is a long road, and like, that's okay. Like the book has gotten so much better over these years. I have grown as a writer. I think my skin is a little thicker. I think I just knew nothing. I just knew so little. And I think because I had worked in magazine publishing, which felt somewhat adjacent to book publishing, I was like, I don't really know this, but I like, like whatever. It can't be that different. And it's so different. And it's so, I think book publishing is such a like self-contained industry with it has just such different rules, and there's just a lot about it that you just kind of have to learn. And I've learned a lot. um, and it's actually my ultimately, I did wind up getting pregnant and having children. And the it's cool that they are now at ages where I have a daughter who's 9 and twins who are 7. And it's just a cool bookend because they are sort of at the beginning stages of their reading lives and writing lives. And they're old enough to see this happening, see my book come into the world. And there's something like special about that. Yeah. And them like bearing witness to it. And it's a weird, I've had it in my life, this project in my life for so long, a full decade, that there is like this almost wistfulness at now being at the point of letting it go. Yeah. I think I really needed to hold on to infertility and make sense of it and sit with it. And I didn't imagine I would sit with it for this long, but now that it's like, I feel like it's just going out into the world, and there's a strangeness to that is like, I don't know what to make of yet.
Are you working on the next book?
I have like, so I have a folder on my computer that's like, it's there. And it has some ideas and some little slivers of things. But I haven't really been able to pivot and invest because I've just been so like focused and devoted to this thing. And so I think I'm on the brink of something new.
What is your best advice for aspiring authors?
Just don't stop. I think there are just so many opportunities to doubt yourself, to give up, I mean, it really hurts. Like, it really hurts. And I think writing feels just like who I am. And I think anybody that considers themselves a writer probably feels that way. You know, it's an identity. So I guess like if that's who you are, then nothing anybody says like can interfere with that. Because it just is, you know?
I love that. Traditional last question on this podcast is, when you may feel a bit of pressure is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Phenomenal last question. So there's a song by the Indigo Girls called Love Will Come to You. And when I was in my teens and 20s, I interpreted this song as being about romantic love. And when I was going through infertility, it just spoke to me completely differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like the perfect articulation of the longing I was feeling, the pain, this sort of like thread of optimism through the vast unknown of how this was all going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
And it also to me feels right because I think the Indigo Girls are just the best. And like before there was Taylor, you know, they were like nobody could speak to like the emotional inner lives and the complexity of the female experience quite like the Indigo Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we'll buy the rights. We'll put it in the movie.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful. Amy Gallo Ryan, thank you so, so much for joining. It's really, really been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.